I can remember a time when we would be out and people would stare at you, you know. I wouldn't be aware of it because I can't see, but Bev would tell me about, you know, people look at you like you were some kind of a sideshow.
Mike Rogers cannot see, but he plays the blues harmonica with a passion that lights up the room. He and his harmonica have opened for acts like the Eagles and Emmylou Harris. Rogers once made his living teaching remedial English, but began losing his sight in his 30s to retinitis pigmentosa. By the time he was 40, his sight was gone, and he had to find a new career.
You know, after I left my job, it was very scary for a while there, but gradually, you know, once you get over the fear and you have to say to yourself, well, this is the way it is, and it's not going to change. You know, your sight's not going to come back, so you just have to make up your mind that you have to find other things to fill your life.
At first, there were not very many choices.
When I first retired, the state of Maine, for example, didn't do a whole lot with people with visually impaired as far as rehabilitation, because there were some people who worked they had these stands, like a concession stand in government buildings where they sold sandwiches and cigarettes and whatever, you know. And so there were a certain amount of people that did that, and some of the older people who were blind were actually living at the Maine Center for the Blind in Portland, and they did chair caning, which I learned to do by going up there and studying. They also they made brooms. The women did sewing. They made vests, and they made some other things, bags and stuff. And that's pretty much what was going on at that time. But fortunately, and I learned to do chair caning, and I did cane chairs for many years. But you know, it was not a money-making craft.
Rogers turned to music.
I was given a harmonica when I was 15. It was like a Christmas gift, and I learned to play it just from my own amazement, you know, for years. And by chance, one of the teachers that I worked with was a musician, and he was doing a concert at school, and just by chance I played with him at the concert just for fun, and it led to a whole new career for me. So. When you play the harmonica, you got it in your mouth anyway. You know? So I never really considered losing my sight as being a big problem for my music. What was harder was the fact that I became dependent on other people to get me here and there, and even in clubs. You know, I had to have assistants, and the clubs are all, you know, they're hard to get around in and stuff.
Some are harder than others.
The other day I was playing an outdoor concert, and they had a temporary stage set up, and in order to get on the stage, you had to climb up 3 steps of a step ladder and then step over onto the stage. So I'd have somebody hold the ladder for me, and somebody grab my hand when I got, you know, to get on it. So that's when you realize, you know, plus my age, you know, I'm 70, I'll be 74 in a couple of weeks, and along with my sight, I just have to be very careful.
And while the Americans with Disabilities Act has made some things easier, there are some things Rogers has worked out on his own.
I mean, there's things you have to do for yourself, you know. The ADA Act it's a wonderful thing, but at the same time, you always, if you have disabilities, you've got to use your head and figure out ways to get around certain issues.
During the 1980s, Rogers served on 2 task forces focusing on rights for the visually impaired. One of them was led by State Senator Walter Hitchens of Elliott.
He was involved in getting the voter law changed so that blind people and people with visually impaired could actually go into the voting booth with somebody of their own choosing, because before that, you had to go into the booth with an official from the town you were in, so they knew how you were voting, you know. And in order to get privacy, he worked to get this law through in the state that you could go into the booth with a person of your own choosing, which I thought was a big thing. And he also worked to protect blind people from being physically assaulted. He was instrumental in helping change the law that way.
For a time, Rogers lived in Georgia, working with very special arts, teaching young musicians with disabilities how to play the harmonica. It was a lesson in finding their own unique skills.
Everybody has something special that they can develop, and you may not know what it is when you're young, but just, you know, you have to be on the alert for it, and when you find it, work it.
When the ADA became law, Rogers began noticing the changes, but he says the transition was gradual.
Nothing was immediate when it went through, I don't think. You know, the changes kind of came gradually. You began to see ramps, and you began to see braille on things, you know, see things that made it easier to get around. I noticed in public buildings, you know, there would be a lot of easy access ramps and that, especially in newer buildings. But you know, I find even today it seems to me there's a lot of older buildings that are very hard to get in and out of for people with disabilities.
In addition to the changes in the physical world around him, Rogers senses a change in attitude toward persons with disabilities as well. But whether it's the physical environment or changing attitudes, Rogers views the efforts towards disability rights with a certain amount of patience.
I think that the ADA it's a wonderful act, and I think it's a process. You know, I think that as time goes on, more and more things will be done to make the playing field equal for people with disabilities. It's a big area. It's like any other big area, you know. It just takes a lot of time to make changes. Don't come overnight.
I'm Keith Ludden. Our series on the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act is funded in part by the Maine Humanities Council in partnership with Oral History and Folklife Research, Alpha One Independent Living Center, WMPG, and the Disability Rights Center of Maine.